which we've been working on and we're on the verge of finalizing. We want them to know how much we appreciate and respect all the time and work and effort they put in past to these negotiations, and we hope they'll re-engage despite everything that's happened. We know they're upset about it.
Secretary, yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu declined to refuse to carry out further strikes on Hamas operatives. As you know, there's Hamas operating in Turkey, in Egypt, in addition to Qatar. What was your message on further strikes? Was it don't do it again? Was it another message?
Well, I'm not going to discuss the details of everything that we said. That's not the way you can conduct diplomacy or international relations via press conference in that way. But what I would say is this, is what I just said a moment ago. We all prefer that this end with a negotiated settlement that leads to the release of every single hostage, both alive and deceased, that leads to the demilitarization and disarming of Hamas, so they can no longer pose a threat, not just to Israel, but everyone. These are barbarians. These are animals in Hamas. And that leads us into a process of reconstructing Gaza so the people of Gaza could have a life free of Hamas and a life that's much better than what they've experienced under Hamas. That's what we all prefer. We think Qatar can play a very key role in that. We don't want to see anything that undermines that. So that's why we added it to the trip. They're very, they're close partners. We've worked with them on a lot of things, and we want them to stay engaged despite being upset as they are with what happened last week. And then the president said he wasn't happy to see that happen. But nonetheless, all these problems are still here, and they got to be fixed, and Qatar can play a key role in solving it.
Mr. Secretary, the major complaint of countries in Doha yesterday was that the United States holds a double standard when it comes to Israel, that it's not holding Israel to account for its actions that they see as an escalation, the killing of civilians in Gaza. What will be your message in Doha today to reassure?
Well, look, I mean, the civilians are being used as human shields by Hamas. They've always done it. That's why they hide in tunnels and the civilians are on top. That's why they take hostages the way they have. That's why they'll take more hostages if they can get their hands on them. So the president wants to see it end. He wants to see it end quickly. And we prefer that it end quickly via negotiated settlement so all the fighting can stop and we can begin the very hard work as an international community, not just the United States, of rebuilding Gaza and providing the people of Gaza a much better life than what they've had under Hamas. And we think our partners in the region can play a key role in that, and we hope they'll stay engaged, and we think Qatar can play a very important role in that as they've tried to do in the past.
Is this the last chance for Hamas to avoid a broader Israeli move into Gaza City?
Well, as you saw, the Israelis have begun to take operations there, so we think we have a very short window of time in which a deal could happen. We don't have months anymore, and we probably have days and maybe a few weeks, so it's a key moment, an important moment. And again, our preference, our number one choice is that this ends through a negotiated settlement where Hamas says, we're going to demilitarize, we're no longer going to pose a threat, we're going to disband, we're going to release every single hostage. By the way, there shouldn't be a single hostage. If you want to fight a war, you fight wars between combatants. You don't fight wars by taking civilians as human shields. And in this particular case, with the hostages for almost over 2 years now, that's a barbaric practice. It's an unacceptable practice. The president called it out yesterday. So that's what we prefer. We want it to end that way. We hope. We've done a lot of work, and Ambassador Witkoff has spent countless hours working on this. We think the Qataris could play a very key role in making that happen. That's his preference. And that's how we want to see it. Sometimes, when you're dealing with, a group of savages like Hamas, that's not possible. But we hope it can happen. We're going to do everything we can to see if it is.
Secretary, what's your message to Israeli ministers who are calling for a partial or complete annexation of the West Bank? And are you worried that the Abraham Accords could be in jeopardy?
Yeah, look, I think much of that is a reaction to several nations around the world deciding to unilaterally declare a Palestinian state. We warned them that we thought that was counterproductive. We actually think it's undermined negotiations because it emboldened Hamas, and we think it undermines future prospects of peace in the region. We thought it was unwise to do that, and I think you're seeing that as a counter-reaction. It's what we thought would happen. We warned them that this kind of action would happen among some in the Israeli government if they did what they did. But right now we're focused on how can we end what's happening in Gaza. How can we end Hamas? How can we get the hostages freed? And how can we create a framework so that the people of Gaza can have a much better life than what they ever had under Hamas? That's what the president wants, and that's what we're going to continue to work on.
With this Gaza City offensive, Is it your still assessment that Hamas can be militarily defeated? We're at over 700 days of war.
Well, they may not have a choice but to militarily defeat them. You know, I think the problem, if it wasn't for hostages and civilians, they would have been defeated a long time ago. But these guys hide behind civilians and they hide behind the hostages. That's why they took the hostages. And not this would have been, if there were no hostages and no civilians in the way, this war would have ended a year and a half ago. So, but now it's kind of at a break point. I mean, you've seen what the Israelis are saying. I mean, at some point this has to end, and it has to end with Hamas's defeat. Our hope is that we can still negotiate something where the fighting stops, Hamas is disarmed, and the hostages are all released, and we can help rebuild Gaza, not just us, but the world, to give those people a better life than what they've ever had under these savages in Hamas. That's still our hope. We're going to do everything we can to try to achieve that. It may not be possible, because dealing with Hamas is not easy. And these are very bad people.
Are you worried about the risks of a Gaza City offensive? I know some of the ideas.
Yeah, war's risk. I mean, there's risk involved in war. There's no good war, right? We don't like war. The president doesn't like war. The only thing worse than a war is a protracted one that goes on forever and ever. At some point, this has to end. At some point, Hamas has to be defanged. And we hope it can happen through negotiation. But I think time, unfortunately, is running out in that regard. 2.5 years, they still don't release the hostages. And at some point, Israel, it's their war. They're going to get to decide how they want to proceed because they're the ones that were attacked on October 7th. But again, I want to reiterate, if there is a way to negotiate an end to this that leads to the release of the hostages and the elimination of Hamas as a threat, we're for that. That's what we want to see happen. We're going to continue to do everything we can until there's nothing left to do, but we hope we can achieve something. But it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy.
Who exactly are you having the negotiations with? Some Hamas officials were in Qatar to discuss their proposal that the president had given.
Yeah.
They were attacked by Israel. So who is it that in Hamas who you're actually trying to talk
Well,
with?
I mean, whoever has the authority to release the hostages.
Are we talking about the Qatar mediated talk?
Well, Qatar would play.
Talk?
Yeah, I mean, the Qataris and the Egyptians have worked together on this, and they're important mediators. If any country in the world can help mediate it, Qatar is the one. They're the ones that can do it. Now, I don't know if they can after what happened, but I think they could. If anyone can, they can. There's no other country in the world that can play that role, and we hope they can. If they can, we want to be supported by it.
Are you going to ask Qatar to have Hamas no longer be within their country, or are you still asking
Well, we're
them?
going to ask Qatar to continue to do what they've done, and we appreciate very much, and that is play a constructive role in trying to bring this to an end. Obviously, they have to decide if they want to do that after last week or not. But we want them to know that if there's any country in the world that could help, end this through a negotiation, it's Qatar, and we appreciate that. And if there's a chance to do it, we want to encourage them to do it. They'll have to make that decision. And if we can play a role, he's the only leader in the world, that can talk to both the Ukrainians, the Europeans, and also to the Russians. President Trump. He's the only one that can. And he's not going to easily forfeit that role because he's the only one that can play it. If somehow he were to disengage from this or, sanction Russia and say, I'm done, then there's no one left in the world that could possibly mediate that end. Now, maybe we get to that point. We hope not, because it's a really bad war and he wants it to end. All right, let's go.